All right, so now we'll talk about the question, what about attention makes it economically so valuable that these companies are ranked among the top earning companies in the whole world. Now, the conception you find in Wiliams is one that he finds in the economist and psychologist Herbert Simon from the 1971. And we might call this the scarce resource conception. So, quote from Simon: in an information-rich world, lots of information around, the wealth of information means a dearth, so scarcity of something else. That is the scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. Information consumes attention. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. So you have a lot of information coming around, so poverty of attention. Now, and the need to allocate that attention efficiently among the overabundance of information sources that may consume it. Okay, so that's a popular conception. So Herbert Simon, he was an economist, political scientist, and cognitive psychologist, very famous, won the Nobel Prize in 1978, was one of the pioneers of several modern day scientific domains, from artificial intelligence, information processing, decision-making, problem-solving, organizational theory, and complex systems sort of analysis. So it's a really important figure between sort of psychology, computer science, and political science, economics. So that was his idea. Here's a sort of contemporary version of it. You find something like that in Wiliams, as I said, also by Hendricks and Vestergaard. They wrote a book about this, the attention economy. So here's this: economics has been described as the study of the allocation by individuals and societies of scarce resources. When attention is viewed as a scarce resource, it creates the basis for studying the information age as an attention economy. Okay. Now, that's connected to a common way of thinking about attention as a tool for reducing information. So you pay attention to, there's so much happening, you can't pay attention to everything. So you have limited capacities, and attention is the tool that selects among this huge amount of information that's floating around in the world for this small brain that we have. Okay, so it's a common way of thinking about attention, and that idea of attention is valuable because it's a scarce resource connected to that idea. But that doesn't seem quite right, I think. Because one reason is, there are many reasons, and I have written about what's wrong with this scarce resource conception, a whole book, but it's not just about that, it's about that among things. But one problem is that it doesn't seem to really fit the history of the attention merchants, that is, of those who sort of harvest patterns of attention to then use them for their own purposes. And the Timbu describes this history, and one thing that he describes is also how that's used politically. So he describes this, it's an interesting way of thinking about also what, for example, the Nazis did in Germany. So what he describes is that the Nazis, they wanted to efficiently get their propaganda into all houses in Germany. And what they did was to make sure that everyone had a radio. So at that time, radios were rare and expensive. So they developed this cheap radio, the so-called Volksempfänger, that now everyone could afford. And that allowed Goebbels, who's on that wall together with Hitler, to speak through the radio to all the Germans. Okay, the reason I bring this up here is that the attention of the German people, that everyone would pay attention to Hitler's speeches, was important. But it wasn't because it was important. So there was valuable, attention was valuable, but not because there was too much information around. It was valuable because the attention of people gets you to their lives. So attention is fundamental to how we organize our lives. It's like when you pay attention to Hitler's speeches every day over dinner, then it integrates into what matters to you. It becomes part of who you are. So attention, what you pay attention to, is important for who you are. People care about that because it can change who you are. Okay. So this is nicely expressed in William James. So this is not James Williams, but the William James that argued with Clifford when he says, each of us literally chooses by his way of attending to things what sort of universe he shall appear to himself to inhabit. So what kind of world you inhabit, that depends on what you're paying attention to. So I often think about, supermarkets that are stocked with thousands and thousands of things. What do you pay attention to? These are, without attention, it would be unorganized. So it's because you pay attention to some things, you pick them out, that gives your world a sort of center. That is the things you pay attention to, things that are other things that you don't pay attention to. So if I go to a supermarket like this, I don't even notice many things, but some things I care about and they pay attention to. These organize my life. So the way I like to think about attention is the power to partly actively, through our influence by environment, prioritize some aspects of a life, to focus on these things at the expense of other things. And that way of organizing our lives is central to how we experience the world around us, how we feel about ourselves, how we come to know what we come to know and what we come to neglect, what we come to want and our emotions, and how we're going to come to act in the world. Okay, so attention really sits as the intersection between our decisions, our environments, our choices and habits, our social environments, how we experience, how we plan, how we make decisions, what belief we form, and what we see, how we act, and so on. So it's a central organizing force in our minds. Okay. So one other way I like to put it sometimes is the structure of attention weaves the texture of our lives. It influences the way we experience ourselves in the world. So on this conception, then, attention is valuable not because it's a scarce resource or because there's already some information in the world. It's valuable because it's what explains which actions we're going to perform and how we're going to perform them, what we're going to believe and how stable those beliefs are when you present it with counter evidence, the emotions, habits, and character traits we're going to form, the ability to have self-control and sustained engagement with anything in the world, and how we consciously experience anything in our world. So how we fundamentally relate to the world around us is explained by attention. That's why it's central, and that's what makes it valuable. So because by engineering our attention, that is deliberately changing our patterns of attention, these advanced attention mergers are going to control a central organizational structure of our minds and of our embodied life too. It changes our bodies literally, what we're going to pay attention to. And that control, to have this direct control over how someone's going to live, that is of obvious economic value. Okay. But it raises also the following question. And so this is now the question that we're going to discuss. Isn't that problematic? Isn't there something ethically wrong about having that kind of control over someone's life? So that's going to be the next part of the lecture.